Hello, everyone. This is Mike, and welcome to session 25 of our Cognos Report Training Series. Today, we're going to discuss and build an end-to-end path for virtual machines. Right, so we want to see that entire stack on one report. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down by protocol. So we will have 2 pages in this report, both separated by tabs, and one's going to be SAN specific, the other will be NAS specific. I think it's easier to look at the queries that are associated with these two protocols and do them separately in separate sessions. It is quite robust. There's a lot to it. It is a demanding advanced type query, and I want to make sure you really understand how these different tables that build this solution all relate to one another. Okay, so it's important to see that, and I want to make sure we fully understand how to present this to our customers because it is, like I said, advanced. All right, so let's start the process here. We're going to click on Content, go to New, click on New Report, click on Create, and then select your source, go to Packages, select Inventory here. I'm going to do most everything in Inventory, and that's why we're going to focus on that currently. Let's drag a list object to the page, navigate to the queries, grab a SQL object, align it to the Cognos query, and I want you to type in VM SAN path. Okay, and then connect the SQL object to your syntax, which is pass through, and connect it also to your data source, which is inventory. Right, now within the query, it is, like I said, going to be quite a number of joins, and we need to actually access the schema in order to orient ourselves to what is required for this specific use case. All right, so let's go over to our schema documentation. Let's navigate to observability, down to reporting, down to schema tables. Click on schema tables on the front page. Navigate up the top, and let's get familiar with what we're going to focus on. So this is for VMware, of course, but it also could be for cloud resources. So any type of virtual compute, you're going to use this type of data structures to solve your business problems around those specific resources. Okay, so here I'm looking at HV. So any table that's prefixed with HV and inventory refers to a virtual device, a virtual machine. Okay, compute only virtual machine. All right. Now we can use all of these tables in order to build that path, that end-to-end visibility into our VMware environment. And there are some nuances when you're working with the cloud. I'll get to that hopefully in a future session. But for VMware, it's actually pretty straightforward. And like I said, it's just the amount of relationships that we're going to build and how they're built and how we represent that data is where the difficulty can come in to play. All right. So first off, when we look at compute, it's similar to storage. There is a hierarchy there. So end-to-end path starts at the cluster. Then you would go to the ESX. Then you would go to the virtual machine, VMDK, data store, backend storage. Okay, that's the path we want to show here. Right, so we have to have the components for all of those things in our data warehouse, and we do indeed have that, but there's a specific way that you need to lay it out. All right, so we're going to start off our query with the select, and I'll definitely paste this stuff in. I know you don't want to watch me type. It is a little bit tedious to wait for that to show up on the screen. So, but I want to start this off just with the first 3 tables so we get an idea of what we're trying to accomplish. All right. So we're going to use HV virtual machine as our from table. So we type in HV virtual machine, and I use the alias HVVM. We're going to join host. We've done this before. You've seen this in previous sessions, but again, I want to reiterate it here so we're comfortable. And then I'm going to use my on statement. I'm going to basically say HVVM host ID equals HID. All right. So remember, in virtual machine, you have the host ID key, and you also have the data store ID key. All right. And that's why I'm using HV virtual machine, even though it's in the middle of the hierarchy in compute. It's a good place to start because remember this, I'm using host. I'm connecting to the host table. Well, that supports both physical and virtual hosts. And those hosts are usually on the virtual side ESX servers, right? And there's another table that I want you to be familiar with, which shows me how to connect the cluster name to the environment. And down here under HV specific tables, we have HV server. And HV server has the host ID and the cluster name in that table. I'm definitely going to use that as well in this stack. All right, so over here, once I join on host, I'm going to join on HV server. All right, I'm going to call it HS on, and I'm going to use the host ID equals HS host ID. All right, and that allows me to relate that cluster name to any of the subordinate nodes within the cluster, which will be the ESX environment. All right, so up here, let's specify that. So it's HS cluster name, and remember that from the schema, cluster name, it's not name like when we look at HV virtual machine or host. No, it's cluster name. So get that down pat because you're going to use that a lot in the future. All right, so it's HS, which is your HV server cluster name, as cluster name. Next up, I'm going to use my host, which is name, as host. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I like to be specific, so I'm going to call it ESX server. Okay, and then the operating system is HOS as ESX OS. And then finally, we're going to use HVVM name as virtual machine. And I always like certain components with my virtual machine, which would be processors. So HVVM, actually first OS as VM OS, and then HVVM processors as vCPU, and then HVVM memory divided by 1024 as VRAM in gigabytes. Okay. And then finally, I'm going to go back to my schema and make sure I have my capacity metrics associated with the VM, because we are going to have separate capacity metrics here. We will have the VM, we will have the VMDK, we will also have the data store and the backend LUNs or NAS shares that we use in this report. So you're going to have that full stack, that full path for your end user use case. Okay, so right now we can use HV, and I'm going to show you. It's just so you understand the differences, or if there are any differences. But HV virtual machine does have some good metrics. Like down here, you have provision and use capacity, so I can add that as well. There's your processors and memory. Remember, memory is defaults in megabytes. Okay, so we want to convert that to gigabytes. Sorry, keep tripping over that. So yeah, so we basically have to divide it by 1024. It gives us gigabytes. Okay. Finally, and again, this may be redundant, but I want to show you anyways. Provision capacity in megabytes and use capacity. So we're going to do that too. HVVM provision capacity MB divided by 1024 as provisioned in Gibby. And then HVVM used capacity, maybe, as used. And that's VM used. Remember that, okay? So let's validate, and we have a syntax error. I probably have something misspelled. All right, so let's check through this. This should be good. All this is good. And yeah, there's a little subtle error up here. I typed a period. So that's why we do a check. Always validate, make sure we have it correct. And I have another spelling error. And you can see why I don't like to type. All right, there's a perfect example. You got a missing Y here. There you go. Validation successful. So from now on, without boring you to tears here, I'm going to paste in the rest of it so you can understand each segment as we go through. Okay, so this allows me to see at least the VM, the ESX, the cluster to the ESX to the VM. All right, so here are the fields. Right click on it, do a view tabular data. It'll give you a raw list of the results. Here's your cluster, here's your ESX. And you can see some stuff in here from Amazon. And we can filter that out. We can just focus on just VMware. It's quite simple to do. Right, so right here you do see some other, you'll see Google Cloud, Azure, all that good stuff. But notice that the EX server is a location. Yeah, those are some of the nuances with VMware versus the cloud resources, the hyperscalers. We're going to get different results based on what we're looking for. So you have to convert this. There is really no ESX server associated with EC2 instances. They don't expose any of that to end users. So when we pull this via REST API, this is what we get. So you get most all the other data that you need. Okay, but just be aware that there's subtle differences between VMware and the cloud. And there's a perfect example of it, right? So in my query, if I just wanted VMware, I can just say um, when I connect to the host and HOS like, and just type in VMware, right? And then validate it, and then click OK. And do again, you can actually right click and do the view tabular data. Just look at the raw data, and I should not see anything but VMware. Okay, so it's a nice little filter, good way to constrain your data and show what your end user actually wants, which in our case is going to be just VMware. All right. Now, next up, we got to tie in VMDK, data store, and the backend storage component, right, all together within this same query. So let's do that. Now, bear with me. I have to copy and paste this because it is a bit of a pain in order to, get this in the environment without making mistakes typing. All right. So the first thing I want to do is use the bridge table, and you can go to the schema here, and again align yourself with the HV section of the schema here in inventory, and I want to get the next component of my stack, which is the virtual disk, the VMDK. So it has to be HV virtual machine to disk. All right. So I'm looking for HV virtual machine to disk, which is a bridge table. All right. So HV virtual disk, HV virtual machine, HV virtual machine to disk right there. That's the last component here on the stack. And but I'm going to join it right away to my virtual machine environment. Okay. So let's grab this. This is HV virtual machine to disk. All right. And I'm going to call it HVM. You can go HVM2D like that. That works. On. And let's use the component HV virtual machine equals. And what I like to do is just copy. Make sure you get this right, just so you don't have to, create any typing issues for yourself. And this is going to be the virtual machine ID. Okay. All right, now validate it. Sure enough, it's correct. It's virtual machine ID. Now, how do I know? Go to the bridge table and bring it up, and you can see you got virtual disk ID, and then you have virtual machine ID. Sometimes it's VM ID. They just shorten it. It's not consistent inside the stack. All right. So here for our bridge table, it's virtual machine ID. All right. And then next up, I want to grab the next layer, which is going to be virtual disk. So it's HV virtual disk is the next thing here to join. All right. So we do a join HV virtual disk. And here it's just HVD is fine on, and make sure we get this correct, all right, because we may have to use left joins if certain components of the stack don't exist. The minute you add a full join, it's only going to show the matches, right? A left join will show me all the virtual machines, and say a virtual machine was not configured with a virtual disk, it doesn't have anything attached to it, it's just sitting there, it will still show up if you do a left join, right? So you have to be mindful of that. Just for this example, I'm just going to do full joins, but left joins are very powerful because it allows me to list out all the primary data and just the matches of that data on the right column, right? When I use a left join. A right join does the opposite, right? But left joins is probably your best bet when you're trying to show the primary data all the time, no matter what it has attached, and then use those left joins to show the relationships that do match, and then it'll just show a blank space if there is no match. Okay, I hope that makes sense, because left joins are very powerful and you're going to use them a lot. All right, so we have our virtual disk. Okay, so I want to tie that virtual disk to the um, to the bridge table, okay? And then I'm going to paste that in there, and it's, again, you go up to the schema. We already looked at it. It's just virtual disk ID, all right? So you can copy and paste it. It's no problem. Makes it easy, all right? Equals HVD ID, all right? Validate to be sure. There you go. Good. All right, so that's the first thing. And then I can come up here, and I can add my HVD name as VMDK, right? So let's go to the schema again. And I'm doing this on for a reason, so you get used to leveraging the schema so you can memorize it eventually. But you have HV virtual disk, and you do have components here. You have the data store ID, you have LUN ID, which is good, and then you have the capacity metrics associated with the VMDK. All right, you have the name of it, of course. All right, so you have use capacity and capacity. All right, those are the two metrics that we can leverage here. All right, so VMDK, HVD, you're going to have capacity. MB divided by 1024. Right, now we're gonna have to sum some of these, because when you're setting up these queries, if you don't group them properly, it won't show up properly, right? So we want to make sure that all of the VMDKs that are associated with each VM show up, and that is tricky if you don't do it right. So let's make sure that happens with our query. So I'm going to say this is VMDK capacity in gigabytes, and then there's HVD used capacity. Again, it's the same thing, MB 1024 as VMDK used. Okay, and then validate to be sure. There we go, we got that good. Let's click OK. Let's bring it over to our Cognos query. Go to your source, grab the 3 objects we just added, drag them over. If I can get it, there we go, good. Go over to your Cognos query, right click on the Cognos query, and you should see the VMDKs now. All right. Now here's the problem. There's a lot of virtual machines that will have multiple VMDKs. Okay, so we have to introduce grouping into this query. It's very, very important. So I want to group by, and you can use numbers here. I can actually use 1, 2, 4, and then count your way down. So here's 1, 2. Right here, here's 1, 2, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, so there you go. Those are the fields that I can group by. I can specify numbers, names, IDs, whatever I want. And then when I group by, if I do get multiple VMDKs per VM, it's going to show up in my query. All right, so that's critical here, right? And a lot of times your end user will want you to group these together and just show the total capacity. We can do that as well, all right? And if I have time in these sessions, I'll definitely do that. So let's continue on. All right, so I'm going to grab some more components here. Next thing we need to do is get the, let's see, the volume information. Okay, and we can also get the data store information. That's okay, but I like to actually make sure. Well, I like to make sure I can connect the data store. So let's do that first, and then I can get the volume information that's connected to the data store. All right, so I can do a join. Whoops, my bad. I just pasted in the whole thing. I don't want that. That's not exactly what I wanted. So bear with me. I'm gonna just paste this. I don't have to type. All right, so here's the HV data store on, and then we want to join it on the virtual disk. Okay, so I have the virtual disk, right, and that's HVD, so I want to say HVD, and make sure we get the right keys here. So it's data store ID to HV disk data store ID. Okay, so that's critical. So when you want to connect these together, it has to be like that. Make sure you validate. There you go. Validation successful. So that's the correct path. Now I can add the data store in here, and I call it HVDS name as data store. Okay, validate, and then click OK. So you can see how we're building the path out. It actually works quite well when you take it one step at a time. and then add individual components, test them to make sure they show up. There's the data store, beautiful. Okay, and then you'll have a working query that is accurate. All right, do the right thing. Now I want to do a bridge table. I want to do HV data store to volume because I'm talking about block here. So I'm going to use HV data store to volume. So HVDS to V. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to use HV data store ID equals the data store ID. Okay, in HVDS2V. All right. Again, it's a bridge table, so what is it going to have? It's going to have the volume ID and the data store ID. How do I know? Well, go to your schema. All right, go back up to your HV virtual environment here in inventory, and then look for the HV data store to volume. HV data store to volume right there. Okay, and there's your keys. You have data store ID, storage ID, Q tree ID, volume ID, and rep volume. That is for shared storage. Okay, so when we go back here and I want to connect to HVDS, all right, and that's right here, the data store ID, and then I'm going to combine that to volume. So let's first create the relationship for the data store to the bridge table HV data store to volume. All right, so I hope that makes sense. So it's HVDS2V data store ID. Now validate, make sure you don't have a syntax error. There you go, that's perfect. And then next up, you're going to join the volume. All right, so it's basically just join volume, which is the table. Now where did I get volume? Well, go back up here, and it's not an HV volume, right? It's just volume. It's the back-end storage, so it really has nothing to do with your virtual environment because it's now the end of the path and it's outside of VMware. All right, you're connecting your volume to the data store, right? So here I need to go find where volume lives, and volume is all the way down the bottom right here. Okay, that's volume. So that's what I'm going to connect to, right? And you're going to do it via the bridge table. So you say volume V on, and it's VID equals, and get the HV data store to volume right here, which is HVDS2V. All right, make sure I don't misspell that. Okay, and then you call it volume ID. Remember the schema. Go back up to the schema. All right, let's go back up to HV data store to volume. There's my volume ID. See, these, again, this is the supported list of foreign keys so tables can join together, right? And bridge tables are always added after the fact, so that's why they're set up to accommodate newly added support for different attributes and metrics. Okay, let's validate, make sure it works. Yes, it does. All right, and then once I get that, I'm in good shape now. I can actually add the storage now too. I can join the storage, which is S. I don't think I have an S here, right? S. And I'm looking at my query here, make sure I get this right. So it's HV data store to volume storage. That's what I want to connect to. All right, so it's going to be on SID equals HVDS2V. Again, keep it consistent, and it's storage ID. All right, let's validate, make sure that works. Yes, it does. Beautiful. Okay, so we're getting the components here, and it looks like we can actually complete. I'll throw the data store capacity in there because it's really interesting, and I want to explain that too. But let's complete the path, and I'll come back to it in the next session. All right. Right now, I just want to have the attributes and the metrics in here properly, right? So next up, you want to do v name as volume, and in volume, again, use your schema. Navigate up and then go back down to volume here. Right, here it is. We do have a capacity metric in here. And I don't want used or consumed. I just want capacity. This one right here. All right. I only want to know it's allocated. Because all the utilizations in the VMware world, and that's what we already stated up above. But here I definitely want to know how much capacity is allocated to the data store. So it's V capacity MB divided by 1024 as volume capacity in Gibby. Okay, so you definitely want that. And once we have that path, okay, I can add the storage as well. So sname as storage. Matter of fact, let me put that above the volume. I like to keep that kind of at the beginning. So let's call it storage. All right. And then you get rid of this last comma and then validate, click OK. Drag your objects over to, you already have data storage, just get the backend storage objects. All right. And we're going to make this look pretty. Bear with me and we'll get to it. I want to get the data in there first. So I'm focusing on the queries. So you can see you have your volume, your capacity. It's aligned up to the appropriate storage and the appropriate data store. Okay. And then grouping comes into play here as well. So the last thing I want to do is make sure you include your storage in the grouping. So data stores 10, 11, and 12 is what I want to put in there. So those there are my groups. And now all the data should appear properly. Just double check, make sure I don't have any errors. All right. And we'll see if it works. There you go. It's pretty quick report. It doesn't take long to process. Okay, so there you go. And that's again only showing you 20 rows. But once I make this look pretty in the report and then output it to Excel, you'll see, the end product and what I'm trying to accomplish. So the next thing we're going to do in the child or the parent, the partner sessions here, there's going to be your SAN and your NAS. So the next thing we're going to talk about is NAS. And I look forward to seeing you in that session. And hopefully this is starting to make some sense.